All right, on this true law stories, we're going to talk about one attorney. Will, say hi.
Hello, Ian. How you doing?
Great. We're going to talk about his story of going from prosecutor to civil defense to becoming a personal injury attorney, doing 40-some trials in Miami, the PR scheme of insurance companies, the case of the Magical Motorcyclist, a father stealing food that went to prison and almost was not awarded what he needed for his medical bills, the scary truth about personal injury windfalls, and the tactics of insurance companies, all this on True Law Stories. But of course, don't forget this is brought to you by videocasestory.com. One of the best ways to promote your business, to tell your stories with your customer stories. Learn how to do that exactly in the new book, Video Testimonials That Land the Big Fish, at testimonialsbook.com. All right, let's get started. Will's a personal injury attorney in South Florida, and the name of the firm, I'm going to let you say it. It's Guinness, Crathon, Zelnick.
You got it right, 100% there.
All right. Focusing on personal injury. We're going to talk today about some of your stories. Accident stories are always pretty crazy because there's all sorts of stuff can happen, and there's so many different pieces. But before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been an attorney and doing these types of cases?
So I have been a lawyer for 9 years. I was barred 9 years ago. I actually came to South Florida by way of New York, which is pretty common.
Yeah.
And when I was in law school, I wanted to learn to be a trial lawyer. So the best way to do that, to get the most trial work, is to become either a prosecutor or a public defender. I chose to be a prosecutor. I was looking at offices in New York, and the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office had on-campus recruiting. So they were doing interviews on campus, and we had to submit a resume and a transcript. All right. So I didn't even have to do a cover letter. So like, all right, I'll just, whatever, I'll apply, I'll do the interview. It's on campus, but I had no connection to Miami. So 3 interviews later, they offered me a job about, I don't know, halfway through my first semester of third year of law school. I had another offer at that time in the Bronx, in New York. So I decided to come to Miami instead. So basically I moved, I packed up my car and I drove down here knowing nobody. And that was 10 years ago. And so I started my legal career as an attorney at the state attorney's office in Miami for 4 years. When I left, I was in the criminal robbery unit. So doing mostly armed robberies, murders, attempted murders, and of felons that have been convicted multiple times. And then I did that for 4 years. I loved it. And then I made the decision to go into civil practice when I started at a civil defense firm, insurance defense, which is generally personal injury defense. I did that and some complex personal injury, toxic tort claims for about 1.5 years. And I just got totally drained.
I can imagine.
I felt like I wasn't helping people. I was sort of a cog in the wheel of this huge industry of defending personal injury cases, which is run and controlled by insurance carriers. So about 4 years ago now, I got hooked up at Guinness Crathon, which was the name of the firm at the time. And so I switched back over to the plaintiff's work, and I've been doing it ever since. And I've been loving it since I made the shift.
Man, that's an interesting journey. You've done a lot of stuff. You probably have some crazy stories from when you were a prosecutor, don't you? In Miami, of all places.
Yeah. Well, one thing people, and I didn't know this at the time, but just from my conversations with other ASAs or ADAs, they call them assistant district attorneys in New York, but it's the same job. In Miami, you get more trial experience than any office in the country.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, believe it or not. I mean, I tried 40 jury trials in like around 4 years. So it's for whatever reason, I don't know if it's cultural or the sentencing scheme, but they try a lot of cases in Miami-Dade County. So it was really a tremendous experience and opportunity for me.
That's amazing. How many trials were you a part of at that time?
So at the state attorney's office, like altogether, it's about 45. And at the state, it was 40. I think I had 30 something to verdict. I think I picked something like 20. I've picked 26 juries, 27 juries I've picked.
Wow.
And yeah, I was I was unusual in how trial active I was. I think I was pretty much more trial active than anybody in the office. And it kind of started like I liked trying cases. And then after a while, I got good results and people would ask me to join them and jump on their trials. So it kind of snowballed from there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you have more trial experience than most attorneys with in their entire career. Yeah, that's amazing. So, and then obviously you have personal injury defense, civil defense, and then you move into plaintiff's work. What do you like about plaintiff's work?
So what I like is I actually get to help a person. There is a lot of, I think, misconception about personal injury cases in the sense that the vast majority of these folks are genuinely hurt and injured. And I think that the insurance carriers and the powers that be do a really good job of painting this industry as some kind of fraudulent get rich quick scheme, right? Like we've all seen it. The guy with the cervical collar who claims that he hurt his neck but that's, in my experience, largely just some kind of PR scheme. And really, the great part about my job is I do get to help people who are everyday people. They're from all walks of life. I mean, I have clients who are on disability, clients who are physicians, clients who are architects, clients who are not well off, clients who have substance abuse problems from underserved communities. I mean, the whole, everything and everyone. And I get the opportunity to really make a difference in their life. Because what happens a lot of the time is you get the third degree, okay, from insurance carriers, particularly liability carriers, insurance companies, who by default assume everyone's lying, and generally. And those people need an advocate. That's why, every personal injury case generally is structured, the fee is structured on contingency, because most people just can't pay a lawyer for hourly rate, right? They wouldn't be able to hire an attorney. So what I love about this job is actually helping people, getting their bills paid, and making a difference in their life in a positive way.
Love it. Love it. And so, I mean, you've had some crazy stories. You have one story about a motorcycle accident?
Yeah, so this was a trial I had recently. And so this is a good example of what I think is kind of an institutional problem with the insurance carriers, right? So they get an idea fixed in their head. And this is the fact pattern, is my client was riding a motorcycle. He's a young kid, 18 years old or 19 years old at the time. And he has a motorcycle and he's driving down A1A, which is a road that runs parallel with the beach in West Palm Beach. Okay. Excuse me. This is Broward County. And there's basically two lanes going north, 2 lanes going south. And it can be very, very congested, you can imagine, with all the beach goers. So the police, for whatever reason, had coned off one of the lanes. Okay. So there's only one lane going, I think he was going south. And so the traffic's moving really slow. And my client decides, hey, I can't wait in this. It's just really slow. So he goes off in the coned off lane. Not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it. All right. But as he's driving in that coned off lane in his motorcycle, the defendant, this lady, she takes a right turn and clips him, right? Knocks him off his bike and he suffers really serious injuries. And the insurance carrier says, no, she's in the coned off lane, right? There's no liability here. We're not going to pay anything. And, I said to them, well, wait a second. Okay. Now, this is a little technical, but in Florida at the time, the law has since changed. We had what's called pure comparative fault. So you can be 10% at fault or 90% at fault, but still collect, right? So it doesn't matter. It's not, okay, if your plaintiff is more negligent than the defendant, you're out of luck. So I said, look, my client's not invisible, right? Mm-hmm. How do you not see him when you're making that turn if you're not looking, right? She must not have been looking. That's negligent, right?
Yeah.
let's be real. I'm not saying my client didn't do anything wrong, but you have some fault on your driver. And they wouldn't accept that theory, that just, we were hit with a complete stonewall. So we went to trial, and that ended up being like my theme in the trial was, look, my client's not invisible. He's right there. You can see him, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. There's my client. And what I said in the opening was like, ask yourself, how does this happen if she looks, how does she hit him? Right? Yeah. I'm not saying she did it intentionally. This isn't an attempted murder trial. So the only way she hits him is that she doesn't look. And so when she took the stand, she had obviously been contemplating what to say in response to that. And this was a very bizarre thing that, happens in trial, where something extremely unexpected happens. And she says, this is during the direct examination. So her lawyer is asking her questions. And he says, okay, when you made the turn, and she blurts out, he wasn't there. He wasn't there. He just like she shouts it out. Okay. So it's everyone it's one of those things where everybody got really quiet, and there was this awkward silence. Like everybody in the room was thinking the same thing, which is, what is she talking about? Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. And the lawyer tried to sort of go on, and she blurted it out again. He wasn't there. So, in closing argument, I said, look, we were all here. What does that mean? He's magical? It's David Copperfield? Did he just appear out of nowhere? She's just trying to come up with an excuse. So at the end of the day, the jury came back and apportioned some fault on my client, but we ended up getting a great result for him. And it was a good example of kind of crazy things happening in trial.
I mean, did she ever explain herself what she meant by that?
No, she didn't. And it was one of those things where, and my trial partner, Ross Zelnick, he did cross-examination, and he kind of, in a situation like that, you have two options, right? You can kind of go at it and have her try to explain it, but then you run the risk of her sort of making sense of what she said and dialing it back, right?
Yeah.
And so he's a great trial lawyer, and he did the smart thing where he kind of just left it there, right? So that when we came up to close in summation, we could say, like, don't believe anything they're saying. What she says is ridiculous. Like, this is nonsense. I mean, look, my client's not invisible. He's not David Copperfield. He didn't appear in front of her car. She just never looked, right? And at the end of the day, the jury agreed. And it was a very interesting moment in the trial, for sure.
Oh man, how did you feel when she said that?
I was shocked, and sort of, it wasn't just me, it was everybody, the jury, the judge, the bailiff. You could have heard a pin drop, because nobody really understood what she was saying. And it's interesting you say that, but I never asked her, like, what did you mean by that? But nobody really ever got the answer, but it really served our purposes. So
yeah, it's like, yeah, and that makes sense. It makes sense not to bring it up, because then the automatic assumption is like she just wasn't looking. Like, obviously he was there. Either she wasn't looking, or she's not fit to drive and can't see a vehicle coming at her. So either way, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then you had actually helped represent a felon on a case.
Yeah, so that was something that I talked about, and it sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier. And this was a case where, and this is sort of a good example of what our firm does. This gentleman was hurt very badly in a car accident. He was hit from behind, when he was a passenger in a car, and he badly injured his lower back. And he got a lawyer, and before he came to our firm, he had a lawyer, and the lawyer was pushing him to take a 5-figure settlement, I think $70,000. And the guy was very frustrated. He wasn't getting communication from his lawyer. And this was one of the big billboard advertising firms in Florida. And eventually he came to our firm, And we looked at the case and we're like, this is what's going on here, because it was a much more valuable, potentially a 7-figure case. And I spoke with the defense attorney, and the defense attorney basically said to me, your guy is a convicted felon. He has drug problems, that's the problem with your case. And
Wow.
so yeah, it was interesting. So and I went back and I talked with him about his criminal history, and he had a burglary conviction, a couple burglary convictions, and petty theft convictions. So nothing violent, and he got an enormous sentence. And this is in Broward County. And I thought, from my experience as a prosecutor, that it was just disproportionate time in prison. 20 years in prison he spent.
Wow.
For basic theft crimes. And when I talked to him about it, he said, look, I when I got out of prison, I didn't really know what to do, and I got caught up with the wrong people, and I started using drugs, and I've cleaned myself up since then. And just so you understand, his conviction was like 7 years before the accident. So this guy had really turned his life around. And so we went to a mediation, and I said, you guys are very fixated on his past. And here's what I'm going to say to the jury. I'm going to say to the jury, they want to discount because my client was convicted of a crime. What they want you to think, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is that he's worth less because of his past. And that's just repugnant. I mean, that's just offensive. And you could and I said, you feel like that's wrong when I say that. I know you do. We all do, because that's just not what justice is. And I said, and not for nothing. The reason he went to prison was because he had just had a baby, and he was stealing food from a store to feed his child. But you didn't know that. All you saw was a conviction on his record. So I'm going to tell the jury that, and good luck with your defense. And so he ended up resolving the case for like 10 times. It was close to $1 million, 10 times what he had initially been offered, because we put the case together, and we actually took the time to speak to this man to understand what the heck was going on. And that was something his prior lawyer just never did.
And I think it's an amazing story, right? And it's finding the story. And I think it's an important thing, because we talk to a lot of personal injury attorneys on here. And I've talked a lot about this, because I think, they, like you said, they see someone who has a past record, and they think they're not worth as much. And how often does that happen?
So it happens a lot. And I don't think it's the lawyers who are representing them that is the problem. Here's what I think is the problem, is that when you talk about liability insurance, all right, which is, we get in an accident and I have insurance to cover your damages, not my damages. The carriers have some kind of macro system that analyzes these cases and comes up with a value based on some algorithm, okay? And that value, there's a range. That value is given to the adjuster, who adjusts the claim, and then they say, okay, defense attorney, here are the reserves we have to cover this claim based on what the algorithm tells us, okay? The person has prior injury, it's low impact, or it's not a high impact, low property damage, whatever. It's these variables that are used in their formula. And then they get stuck in that, right? They get stuck in this system that is designed for profits on a macro level, right? The algorithm is made and designed so that the company in a large data base, right? Not on the micro level, not on the individual case. Their valuations are done that way. So when it gets to me and they say, well, your client has a prior neck injury. And I said, well, look, The prior neck injury was 10 years ago, number one. It's a different vertebrae that was injured, number two. And number three, you can see if you actually look at the MRI reports that the prior injury is less serious than this. So there is a aggravation of this injury or an interval change from a lesser injury that resolves to a serious injury that requires some kind of surgical intervention. And a big part of my job is convincing or trying to convince or advocate for my clients to get out of this big picture analysis, right? Taking huge data sets and trying to give relative values on the micro level to say, look at the facts of this case. It's not the way you're valuing it. That's not what it's worth.
Yeah. And I mean, and what does it mean to those people that you're helping get money? Because it's not a massive windfall for them. It's not like they're all going out and buying mansions with this money, right?
Right. So that's, I guess, another sort of misconception. A lot of what we're doing is paying for medical treatment. Okay. So a lot of folks who can't afford insurance or on Medicare, and there's very, very few doctors and surgeons who will take that to do surgery on them because the rates that Medicare pays or Medicaid, all right, are so low that a lot of doctors just won't take patients that have it because they just pay so little to the providers. So a huge part of what we're doing is just paying off their medical bills because a lot of people get in this medical debt when they get injured. So not only are they injured, suffering, pain, suffering, but they're also suffering financially because now they have to pay bills back for the treatment that they needed because somebody else was negligent or careless. So a huge part of it is just paying off those bills, making sure that they don't owe money because somebody hit them with a car. I mean, that's just terrible.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is what we do. And of course, they get money in their pocket at the end of the day, but that's sort of the icing on the cake in reality.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's something that we all need to hear because like you said, that the insurance companies have huge PR budgets and they make you think that, you're going as flow, or the other side of it, they make you think that you're suing the person who's driving the car, don't they?
Yes, that's what they do. And the courts and the lawyers, we don't tell the jurors that there's an insurance carrier paying for the defense costs. And I sort of understand the logic behind that, but it's really kind of like this hidden thing where, we don't talk about the insurance. But a lot of the litigation is because insurance carriers, look, at the end of the day, it's a business.
Yep.
Okay. The way a huge part of how they make money is collecting interest on your premiums that they're required to keep. All right. So the longer they keep that money, the more interest accrues, the more money the company's making. So their systems are designed, like I said, on this macro level. All right. So they don't look at it one by one. Here's the profit we get on this one. They say, if we value these 10,000 claims this way, we'll net X profit. So each of these claims that allege these particular injuries, we put this value on, and then there are some variables that change. Mm-hmm. There's a great book called Delay, Defend, and Deny about the software that these carriers use to provide an evaluation and a value on these cases. So a lot of what I do involves how do we get them past that to understand the personal level of this, okay? And what you have to do as a lawyer to be effective in my business is you have to get to know your clients well enough to be able to explain what the heck is going on here. How do I get them to think outside of the box? That comes from the client. So that's why I spend a lot of time getting to know my clients and sort of talking about their background and everything that's happened to them leading up to the incident.
Oh, I mean, it's important. It is important. I'm seeing it so many times where like that story is everything in their case. It is everything. Well, that's awesome. So if someone is injured, how do they get in touch with you?
So you can go to our website, which is gkzlegal.com, and you can look me up, and my email is there, and you can message me directly, or you can call our office, which is 954-905-4600. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me all over social media, and you can message me. I'm always happy to talk to people about, getting involved in an accident, navigating bills, navigating insurance carriers. That's what we do.
Yeah. And it costs nothing to talk to you. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have had legitimate claims and don't talk to an attorney. I'm like, it's not going to cost them anything, and they'll have some peace of mind. And a lot of times people have cases and they don't go after them, don't they?
Yeah, it's true. And I think that is a testament to the success of this PR machine against personal injury claimants, right? And maybe that's by design, or maybe that's just a result, but people shouldn't be afraid to contact a lawyer about these kinds of things. Because look, let's take the motorcycle case, for example. Somebody might say, oh, I was in the coned off lane. I don't have a lawsuit. False. That's not how the law works, right?
Yep.
And, maybe they'll get contacted by the insurance carrier who will say, we're willing to offer you $10,000 for a settlement. And they say, well, that's what the value of the case is worth, according to the insurance company. And sure, I'll take it. That seems fair. And the other thing is understanding that getting into a lawsuit, there's a couple of things you have to do. You have to help your lawyers, talk to your lawyers. You have to take a deposition. And in most states, you have to attend a compulsory medical examination. All right. It's not like the medical examination is like an orthopedic examination. It's not like an anal probe or something really uncomfortable. Okay.
Most of the time it's not.
Right. And 98.5% of cases settle before trial. So you have a 1.5% chance of actually having to go to trial and testify. So really, what do you have to do? You got to help your lawyer understand where you got treatment, talk to your lawyer, do a deposition, which you prepare for, and then the lawyers do the rest of the work, and they help you through the process, and they make sure your bills are paid. And a good lawyer will tell you, look, you have a case, you don't have a case. But as you said, it's free to talk to us and consult with us. We don't charge by the hour. And I just I hope that people aren't dissuaded from exercising their legal rights because they heard some horror story somewhere, or they don't want to be one of those people. Okay. The reality is the business interests of the insurance carriers, they're not some benevolent, creation,
No.
right? This is America. This is capitalism. They're driven by the bottom line. They're not really looking out for everybody. Maybe the individuals aren't terrible people who work there, but overall, it's a business model, and it benefits their business to look at personal injury claimants like fraudsters, and rather than what it really is, which is people getting hurt and trying to get compensated and made whole for their costs and their pain and suffering.
Yeah. And it's just, it's the insurance, and you think that your insurance, the people representing your insurance company are going to do what's best for you. No, they're going to do what's best for their insurance company.
Right. Right. And I think, look, there are bad apples in personal injury cases. You see things in the news, but you don't see as much the bad apples with the insurance carriers and how they deny claims with really no basis, or they undervalue claims, with really no basis, because that's their decision. That doesn't get the media attention. That doesn't get the soundbite. But that is the reality. This is a system where we have an adversarial system in the United States of America. So what's critical is to have an advocate that'll be there to fight against your adversary, which is in a claim, it's generally the insurance carrier. It's not always a problem, but a lot of the time it is. And that's what we do. And that's what I find extremely rewarding about my job.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Folks, I can't tell you how many people I've seen lives saved by personal injury attorneys, like literally saved because they got the medical care they need. But Will will put a link to all that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Will Volet, for being on True Law Stories.
Thank you very much, Ian. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for taking Will and I on your journey. It's been Iron Garlic and True Law Stories.